Hi Crafty Friends! Welcome to another video where I use 4 parameters from the latest episode of Craft Roulette. Let's see how I get it done this week. As I was figuring out in my head what I wanted to do with this week's parameters, one of the first things I did was go into my stash and pick out neon colors, because when I think of the 80s, I think of neon brights. So I picked out these 4 acrylics that I had that I'm going to do a splashy background with. This week's card is a really quick card. I actually did it an hour before I was leaving for the birthday party that I was actually going to use this card. We'll give this card as the gift with the gift card. So I had the idea overnight as I was thinking about how I want to do the parameters, and this card really leaned heavily into my graphic design background. I struggle sometimes with paper crafting because I get a vision in my head and I don't necessarily have the physical products to back it up. So then I go to my computer and I start searching for the elements or the font or the type that I want to use. So that's why this card became really quick, because I printed out a few things that I used on my card, which you'll see soon. But right now, the first thing I wanted to do was do the background that I had in my mind, because that was going to need to dry. Even though I'm using the heat tool on it, I still needed to set it aside because it is acrylics. If you dry it to like done, sometimes it can bubble and crack. So I just tried to just get a little bit, because I added water to each one of the colors so that it would drip more. So there was some water in it that I was able to dry, but if I dried it to like done, it might have cracked or bubbled. So I knew I needed to get some down and then set it aside to dry while I did the rest of the card. And I did dry in between a little bit also so that the colors didn't blend that much, which did work out. And then I also, as you see, I did the brightest last so that it wouldn't get covered up by the darker colors. So that's why I did the yellow last. And I'm happy with the back. This is actually, I started with 5x7 black cardstock from Michaels, and then I cut it down a little bit just so there's some white edge. So as I was drying, I went on to the parts that I had printed out off camera off of my computer. I did a Google search of images and I found some images that really stood out to me that I had envisioned for this card, and I put it on some thick cardstock, and that one right there is what I'm going to use on the inside of the card. I figured, why not, instead of wasting paper, I'll get it all done on one sheet. So I printed out a 5x7 where the type is laid right in the middle, and I'm just trimming that down so that it fits in the file. Well, I actually end up trimming a little bit off. I can never line it up, so I usually trim off 1/8 of an inch and then put it in the card. So that's what I'm doing here. So that one's all ready to go. I Googled birthday card. It was going to be a video game themed birthday for a 13-year-old boy. So I Googled video game cards and looked at some of the sayings, and I thought this one was cute. I had already knew what I wanted to put on the front, so I thought this went with it. So I printed it out, and now I'm just trimming it down so it will fit inside when I get to that. So next I moved on to what I had printed out on my computer on the other half of the paper, and I had already planned to use my 3.5 circle die cut. So I had designed that little circle element to fit so I could use the die cut to cut that out, and I'm just lining it up because I designed it so the type was very close to the edge, so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to cut anything off. And that worked out great. I was very happy with that. And then next, the wow element, I knew I had to fussy cut out. So but I'm getting better at fussy cutting, so I ended up being actually pretty happy with it. Both these elements I found Google searching. It was 2 different Google search. The first one I did a video game controller. I have a video game controller stamp, which is what sparked this whole idea, and I was going to stamp it. It's around the same size, and I knew I wanted to do, new level unlocked, and I was going to put it in this center just the way this is. But because I was so crunched for time, I wanted to, color it in, and then when I was Googling video game cards to get a saying, I saw the image of this video game controller splashed with neon paints, and I thought, oh, that's gonna work perfectly. So I took that and I resized it into the circle that I knew I wanted to use on the 5x7 card, and then I added the new level unlocked type in an arc so that that parameter was filled. And then I went on to Googling. I knew I wanted to say, wow, new lock, new level unlocked. So I Googled wow in a starburst, and I found this one. So I pulled that out and put it on my sheet and printed that out. So now I'm fussy cutting that out. I typically try to do a little less Google searching when I'm going to make a card. I tend to do that more when I scrapbook, because my style of scrapbooking is very theme heavy. So I'll get it again with the graphic design background. I'll be like, I really want a chocolate chip cookie. And maybe I don't have that stamp. So then I go and search an image. I get a lot on Etsy, but sometimes it's just a Google search. And I will get a cookie that I like, and I'll print it out and fussy cut it out. Or I'll use my scan and cut or my Cricut, depending on the mood I'm in. That's why my channel is Craft Girl on Mac, because I use my Mac a lot. It does get heavily used in my paper crafting because I can't steer away from my graphic design background. I definitely consider myself sort of a hybrid crafter because there are days when I will challenge myself to just use the products I have, because I have a lot of stamps and paper, physical and not on the computer, but I also have a lot of digital stamps and a lot of digital kits, so I go back and forth. So with this element, I decided to leave a little white edge as I'm cutting out the starburst, because I thought that a little white edge would look good on the black background that I made with the splatter. So I decided just to give it a tiny white edge to make it pop more. Sometimes I cut the paper to the exact size I know I want it to be, but other times when I do like a splatter or a stencil, I'll do it at the largest side, which is 5x7, and then I'll cut it down when it's done, when it's drying, because there might be a little spot on the edge that I didn't get paint fully to it, or I didn't like the way it came out. So then I'm like, well, I can just trim that one away. So like I felt like that edge with the big blue spots didn't have as much splatter as the other side. So I felt like that was a good spot to trim down. Now I take some art glitter glue and I put it on the back. I'm trying to really get it on the corners. When this dried, it really didn't warp much. I was really happy with how flat it was, but it just had a tiny, tiny bit. So I wanted to make sure I got enough glue that I could glue this down fairly flat. And I just eyeball it. They're handmade cards. If it's slightly off, it doesn't really bother me. Next, I glue the WOW and the controller parts together because I knew how I wanted them to sit. I had already thought about when I was planning out in my head that I wanted the WOW and to be like off center. So I attached them to each other so then I didn't have to keep moving them around on the card. And then just put some glue on the back of them and then just place it down where I wanted it to be, which was basically in the middle. I wanted to make sure I got glue on each one of those little pointy spots of the star and then just put it right in the center. This was such a quick card. I wanted to get it really done well because it's for a kid, so I wanted to make sure nothing was sticking out, so I added a little more glue to that spot. And then I flip it over and give it a really good press. And then the very last part to the card was to add the inside. Sometimes I handwrite them. Actually, I handwrite them quite often. but I wanted to just sort of keep going with the video game theme, so I used the same font for the outside that I did when I typed out the inside. And I'm just going to add, this time I decided to add some double stick tape instead of the glue because I didn't want to add, and like sometimes the glue adds like little, you can see through it, like little like glue marks. So I decided to use double stick tape on this one. And I put it right to the edge, which meant I had to kind of mess around with the tape that went over the edge and push it in so it wasn't sticky. I seem to always do that. And then I just eyeballed it again because I left a tiny bit, I think 1/8 of an inch around so that I didn't have to worry about lining it up perfectly. And just pushed it down and it was good to go. This card for me came together very quickly with the help of my computer. So technically I didn't buy anything new for this card, but I did go hunting on the internet to find the elements that I wanted that were floating around in my head. This may be one of the quickest cards I have done for Craft Roulette. Thanks so much for watching. Have a crafty day.